LAFC has a problem with the MLS Cup format. We have an ass epidemic at Rams games. And has network TV lost interest in USC football? Good morning. I'm James. This is your daily dose of sports and snark for the greatest sports city in the world, Los Angeles. This is the faithful Angelenos morning report. So it is October 27, 2023. We added another new subscriber yesterday to the Angeleno Familia. I appreciate every last one of you, and I'll do my best to keep you in the know about LA. If you like being in the know about LA sports, clickety-clack the like button. Clickety-clack the subscribe button. There's a notification bell. Hit that. It'll let you know we drop new content. Sharing is caring. Let people know we exist. And by all means, comment. I try to get back to every last one of you guys. So before we go through the news and notes, a look at the scoreboard. Yesterday, Anthony Davis scored 30 points to lead the Lakers to a 195 victory over Phoenix. LeBron James added 21 and would have had his minutes cut, as has been the talk this year. But he wound up playing the entire fourth quarter to lift the Lakers to 1-1. Could that be the point? Hold LeBron's minutes down for 3 quarters and just let it rip in the fourth? I don't know. 2 games into the year. Meanwhile, today, the Clippers are at Utah at 6:30. It's not exactly an update that'll make you panic, but Brandon Boston is out for LA. Considering the depth the Clippers have, his foot injury might actually hurt him more than the team. It could cost him a spot in the rotation. And the Kings are at Phoenix at 7. And I really wish I could go to this game. One is I like the Kings' chances of winning, but the other is because it will take place in Mullet Arena. Yes, I absolutely would love to celebrate the haircut I had when I played hockey. Barry Melrose and Ron Duguay must be proud. But let's get to the news. MLS Cup playoffs begin this weekend. We had already talked at length over the last week or so about the Galaxy and the trouble that they're going to face during the offseason. But the playoffs do exist for the black and gold. And the first thing I want to note is that LAFC does have a chance to be the first back-to-back MLS Cup winner since the Galaxy in 2012. It would also make the black and gold just the 3rd franchise to accomplish such a feat in league history. I would even go so far as to say they have a damn good chance of doing it. They finished 3rd in the conference. They have the Golden Boot winner in Dennis Bouanga. Bouanga started off the season on a scoring pace rarely seen in MLS, but then he finished the year with 6 goals in his last 3 matches. But over the course of the year, we learned things about these teams, not the least of which is LAFC has yet to finish the job in their prior 2 shots at a cup, both in CONCACAF Champions League and then in the League's Cup final. It's literally like LAFC was sprinting to the finish line and then stepped on a rake right before the tape, right? Now, you might counter that if you're an LAFC fan. You might say, look, James, they're not playing a Liga MX team this time. And I'll tell you, that's absolutely fair of you to say. But then you would have to concede that there was a fair critique of that team midway through the year. That LAFC looked tired from playing so many damn soccer games. If you assume that LAFC gets swept in the first round, which, by the way, I don't assume that at all, LAFC would have played 53 matches in 2023. I mean, at some point, you'd have to figure their legs are just going to explode more than in your average Michael Bay movie, for Pete's sakes. Now, the fact that MLS has never settled on a consistent playoff format is profoundly disturbing. But who am I? I'm just a jackass with a YouTube channel. You would figure that a professional athlete would kind of happy talk his way through the whole thing and then just complain in private. But LAFC didn't, and that concerns me. That concerns me a lot if I were an LAFC fan. A reporter, for example, suggested that this playoff format was a way to pry more money out of Apple TV and consumers buying tickets. To which Carlos Vela replied, quote, "Everybody knows, but can't say nothing," unquote, which is odd because you just did say something. Goalie Maxime Crépeau joked, why not go instead of a best of 3 for a best of 7? End the season on New Year's Eve, then follow up the preseason a week later. And these complaints, honestly, They do make sense. They do. But when you see those messages in public, you are sending a message to everybody that you'd rather take a nap right now. LAFC's game is speed, isn't it? Right? The counterattack, pressing upfield a lot. I'm not reading any quotes from the players about, hey, we have a chance to make history. I'm reading quotes about players playing too many soccer games. Now, to be frank, I absolutely believe they're going to eliminate the Whitecaps. But that message is going to resonate during the postseason like a TikTok video on some millennial quiet quitting his job. Earlier this week, we mentioned how a rapper that I've never heard of rented out a suite at SoFi Stadium, invited a bunch of strippers, made it rain on said strippers, and finished it up by proposing to his girlfriend. Indeed, a new twist on your classic Harlequin romance. If Harlequin, of course, had a side contract with Pornhub. Look, not exactly the visual that you want to give on network TV. And it was only going to be a matter of time before Matthew Stafford's wife would address the situation on her podcast, right? I mean, after all, she already learned that it's not a good idea to talk about what's going on in the locker room with your husband, right? So Kelly Stafford's daughters allegedly saw what was going on and told her, quote, "Mommy, there's a lot of butts there," unquote. Now look, maybe I'm jaded, right? I'm bitter. I admit it. My life didn't go the way I planned it. But I am seriously betting that while Kelly Stafford was holding her children and patting them and for support and holding their children's eyes away from the twerk fest, that she was privately thinking, this is going to be a great episode of my podcast. Just saying. Look, I tend to be pro women's butts. Maybe not usually after Mass on Sunday, but I tend to be pro women's butts. And who am I to say, right? It's kind of like the deacon would say after the Latin Mass, "Adjutibit quod asninus." The milkshake brings all the boys to the confessional. That's the way it probably is nowadays. But to be real about this, I'm starting to think we have an ass epidemic at LA sporting events. You might recall Lizzo hiked up her dress and started rocking that at a Lakers game. I don't want to have Lizzo's ass anywhere in my life, ever. And I make no apologies for saying it. I don't care if you hate on me or not. I thought long and hard about this whole situation about asses bouncing around during sporting events, during a commercial break. And I came to a couple of conclusions. First of all, I would never take a child to an NFL game in the first place. Have you seen the fights going on over at SoFi Stadium? I would never expose a kid to that. Way too dangerous. So the only solution I could come up with is if you're going to show ass at a sporting event, let Madison Avenue take a stab at it with league-approved ass. If coaches, if players, if referees all have to wear league-approved gear, then the least you could do is say, you know what, ladies? I want you to buy league-approved lingerie on Fanatics, and then knock yourself out. Speaking of Matthew Stafford, the Turf Show Times is a website that I think is pretty decent, but they had a really poor take on the Rams. Quote, "Rams are willing to go down with the ship in Matthew Stafford," unquote. The writer thinks Stafford is injured worse than the team is letting on, that the Rams should have a better record, and it's probably a good time to get an insurance policy in place when Stafford goes down. The only thing I would agree with in that entire story is the possibility that Stafford's hip might be dinged worse than what the team is saying. The record is what it is. I think the Rams 3-4 is pretty much deserved. Of the 4 losses the Rams have had, you could only argue the Pittsburgh game is the one that could have been flipped, in my opinion. But the worst part of the article is where the writer suggests the replacements for Matthew Stafford if he actually has to miss time. Try these names on for size: Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Colt McCoy, Joe Flacco. And then the writer went off even further the deep end and said how much he would want Carson Wentz. Dude, you must be higher than the inflation rate to believe that. That is the first time I have ever heard anyone say that they want Carson Wentz. So stop it. Just stop. The Athletic does not forecast the Rams making any more deals in advance of next week's NFL trade deadline, by the way, but it did add a note of interest. Consider that they traded away wide receiver Van Jefferson earlier this month. The game immediately before the trade, Jefferson only played 2 snaps. Sunday, offensive lineman Joe Noteboom was active, but did not play. So they're probably not making a deal, but keep your eyes open. I don't like sounding alarm bells. There have been plenty going off around the USC football team, and I didn't worry too much about them until now. The Trojans were supposed to be done with the soon-to-be-dead Pac-12 network. Their first few games of the season were banished to a station that nobody has, and honestly, it didn't matter because USC was playing San Jose State, Nevada. Articles at the end was saying, USC is now done for good with the Pac-12 network. Good riddance. Wrong. They're now playing Cal on the Pac-12 network this weekend. And there's pretty much only one reason that could be the case. The regular networks don't want the game. Now, I don't claim to know how TV contracts work. The following is flat out wild speculation. But it stands to reason that USC might lose money with their games on the Pac-12 network instead of, say, Fox or ABC or ESPN. And if that's the case, it's yet another reason to chastise the program for keeping the status quo on defense. Just saying. Defensive line coach Sean Nua admitted, quote, "The problem we have is all 11 guys not being on the same page," unquote. Now, Nua said he takes responsibility for that. And it sounds great until you realize he doesn't coach the linebackers or the defensive backs. He only coaches the D line. And matter of fact, USC often runs a 3-3-5, which means he's only responsible for 3 people out of 11. Coach, I appreciate you taking responsibility. You're not the guy that has to do that. Back when the Rams played in Anaheim decades ago, the Saints came to town with Jim Everett at quarterback, and I was a very young reporter then. Everett comes back, he beats his old team. I asked him two questions about beating the team that let him go. And he was very gracious with me. But then he asked if we could move on from that topic after 2 questions. I bring that up because the scribe asked Justin Herbert 14 questions about his broken finger yesterday. Because as the LA Times has noted, that since Herbert was injured during the Week 4 game against Las Vegas, the Chargers have had 22 possessions, and they have generated just 4 touchdowns and 2 field goals since then. Herbert gave the answers that you would expect to hear. Can't be perfect on every throw. There's a lot of football left to be played. And all of that is true. It is. But if you're a Chargers fan and if you're thinking, oh crap, we're going to have to sneak into the playoffs again at the last minute like every other year, I totally don't blame you. Not at all. We mentioned earlier, by the way, about how the Rams might not be active in the NFL trade deadline. The same for the Chargers. GM Tom Telesco has never traded for talent in the 11 years that he has served as general manager. 0 trades for talent at the NFL trade deadline. Austin Reeves is one of the 12 players most likely to have a breakout season this year, so saith The Athletic. Now, you might think he already had a breakout season, but statistically speaking, you would be wrong, because he only averaged 13 points a game last year. The reason was that he didn't get a lot of reps until after the All-Star break, when the coaching staff realized he was in great condition to play an entire year. Now that he's the clear third option on the team, The Athletic expects him to get more touches and maybe reach 18 points per game. Would you let me know what you think in the comments thread? Talk to me about LAFC's chances to win MLS Cup. Tell me what you would do to limit or control the ass epidemic in LA sports. And if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to subscribe to Faithful Angelenos. We're talking LA sports every single day here. By the way, side note, there will be no episode of Friday Night Chalk Talk tonight. I spent way too much time with a sick friend over at the hospital. I simply haven't had time to X's and O anything out for the local 4 teams. Thank you for watching. I'm James. Faithful Angelenos is a Kian Corte El Queso production. Take care.